Yes.
Okay, the time is 5:16 p.m. on April 1st, 2021, and I'd like to call the meeting of the City of Chula Vista Civil Service Commission to order. In the interest of public health and safety and pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N2920, members of the Civil Service Commission and staff are participating in this meeting by teleconference. In accordance with the executive order, the public may view this meeting online, but not in room B129, Building C at 276 4th Avenue in Chula Vista. The city launched a virtual commenting portal, eComment, that allows residents to comment and participate in the meeting from their own homes. You can find the link to eComment at www.chulavistaca.gov/virtual meetings. Your comments must be received before I call for the close of the commenting period in order to be considered. After the commenting period is closed, I will announce a brief pause to allow the commissioners time to read any comments that have been received. If you have any difficulty or need assistance with e-comment during the meeting, please call 619-409-5927 and Human Resources staff will assist you. Janelle, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Carbuccia?
Here.
Commissioner Sepulveda?
Here.
Commissioner Salas?
Here.
Vice Chair Fish?
Here.
Chair Steps?
Present. The first, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The first order of business is the consent calendar. I will now call for a 2-minute pause to allow the public to submit any final comments on items on the consent calendar. Commissioners, as a reminder, please refresh the view on your screen to ensure new comments appear. Janelle, can we time for 2 minutes, please, or Tanya? Okay, the commenting period for the consent calendar is now closed. Janelle, have we received any written comment on the consent calendar?
No comments were received.
Okay, having received no comments and I'm sorry, did somebody say something? Oh, do any commissioners wish to pull an item for discussion or questions off the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion approved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh,
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Salas.
Have it.
Thank you.
Okay, it was like a race. So I have a motion by Commissioner Fish and a second by Commissioner Salas. Can we, Janelle, can we conduct a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Commissioner Carpuccia.
Aye.
Carpuccia. Commissioner Sepulveda.
Aye.
Commissioner Salas.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fish.
Aye.
And Chair Gersten.
Aye. So the consent calendar passes unanimously 5-0. Moving on to public comment. Public comments is the section on the agenda for members of the public to address the board on items that are not listed on the agenda. I will now call for a 2-minute pause to allow the public to submit any final public comments. Commissioners, as a reminder, please refresh the view on your screen to ensure new comments appear. Janelle, can we set the 2-minute timer? Okay, the commenting period for public comments is now closed. Janelle, have we received any public comment?
No public comment was received.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item. The next item on the agenda is item 2, which is an appeal regarding the removal of 2 names from the eligibility list for fire engineer, recruitment number 195-603-04P. Before we move on to presentations, I do want to just set forth the procedure for the commission, which is laid out in Civil Service Rule 1.04J sub C, which states the Civil Service Commission may review the objection in any manner it deems appropriate, including but not limited to reviewing the filed objection and making a decision on the filed objection without additional hearing on the objection, or allowing either party to comment on the objection, allowing written comments on the objection, or conducting an evidentiary type hearing on the objection. So my inclination is, since we've received a written memo from the department, my inclination, and I like to hear from the other commissioners out of those choices, is to hear positions on both sides and try to make a determination tonight without setting this for an evidentiary hearing. As well as in lieu of making a determination solely on the objection. Do the commissioners have Any thoughts about how they want to proceed? Commissioner Carbuccia?
Yeah, Bill, I think that that's absolutely how we should proceed. It's clear from public comment as well as from the memo that we have the information we need to make a decision tonight.
Okay. Any other commissioners have comments or preference about how we proceed? Or agree or concur or disagree with my thought and Commissioner Carbuccia that we proceed accordingly tonight? Seeing none. So we will proceed accordingly. Does staff have a presentation? I know we've received the memo from the fire chief. So Courtney's not here. Tanya?
I'm
Does
here.
HR want to present anything, or?
I think the memo outlines what happened in this case. On this list, there were multiple ties. Based on those multiple ties, it left the inability for the department to at least promote one person, the way the names were given to the department in groups.
Okay. We've received the fire chief's memo. I'm sorry, Courtney, was that all you wanted to say? I'm sorry?
There's some background noise here, so I will defer to Simone of some of this. But I think in some of the comments, I think the language is clear with respect to what I need to do as the department head, as the human resources director, and that's why it's in front of you tonight. Overall, I'm not opposed to the name staying on the list, but I think this is the venue for this discussion to happen, because I think the direction given to the HR director in the rules is very clear.
Okay. And I know we've received the memo from the fire chief. Does the fire chief or the department want to add anything?
Can I also defer some time to Simone as well, Chair Kirsten?
Sure. So let's hear from, I'm sorry, let's hear, because the party making the objection bears the burden of proof. So I'd like to hear from the fire chief or the fire chief's designee in support of the objection. Is there somebody here from the department?
Yeah, I'm here, Harry Munns, Fire Chief for Chula Fire Department. So thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for giving me the opportunity. And so I didn't know if Simone wanted to go first as part of staff, or should I just go ahead and continue?
I would ask that the chief go first, and I could just provide some guidance and direction as you go forward.
Yeah, it would be my preference the chief goes first, because the chief, as the objector, does bear the burden of proof.
Great. So thank you for the opportunity. So a lot of the information is absolutely still in the memo that was provided, but just to add, I guess, maybe that next layer of context that goes with it. So just to set the table one last time, the current list was established June 25th, 2019, with 14 names on it. And it was extended for 1 year, after its initial 1 year. And that's a very long-standing practice within the fire department. As long as I can remember, with my tenure being 25 years here, that has been the practice. A lot of that is because of the amount of effort and resources required to put on our promotional exams. They're pretty lengthy. They typically require some sort of physical, out in the field type of testing with several proctors, as well as the rating staff itself. So it's a pretty large investment. So I think that's what pushed the fire service into the 2-year type list situation. So some factors that I wanted to put in there, and maybe before I go into the factors, I'll just maybe restate the situation of the actual civil service rule, just to, I don't know, have it be heard verbally. Is that in 1.041 subsection 4, it describes that the Director of Human Resources will remove from the eligibility list the names of any person who has refused appointment after an interview by 3 appointing authorities after certification from the eligibility list. So that's the rule in question, or at least that I'm objecting to. And then here's some of the factors that I really wanted to highlight. As far as the 2 individuals that were removed, my observation of those individuals that they're in good standing within the organization. They're significant contributors to the organization, and they're promotable. there's nothing that I have been made aware of through performance evaluations, their participation within the organization, that would say something different. So Courtney set the table as well. She added is that the current list had 4 different groupings of ties. So out of 14 names, there were 4 different groups of ties in there. And then that's what made the impact of actually, finding the situation of individuals on the list being certified 3 separate times and not receiving an interview. And so just some specifics. In 2020 is when all of the certifications took place. So one took place in February, another in May, another in October, and another in December. And so they all kind of had an impact from the ties. So the first one in February was for 1 promotion, and we interviewed 4 individuals because there was a tie associated with it. So we had 1 additional name added. But really it wasn't until May that these individuals got brought into the interview process, where we had 4 promotions. But because of all the ties, we had 8 interviews. And that's where both of those names got their first certifications attached to them. And then again in October, we had 1 promotion, but again, because of the ties and the stratification of the ties, we actually had to interview 5 individuals. And then finally in December, we had 2 promotions where we had to interview 4 individuals. So that lines up with what we would normally see with 2 promotions, is 3 names plus 1 for the 2 promotions. And it really has had a significant impact due to the ties that brought these names to an interview so many different times that it was virtually impossible to promote these individuals without somebody being dropped from the list according to that rule. So another piece that I want to just emphasize on is the actual, I don't know, I know in communicating with HR, we talk about our promotional lists, and in particular, this one does not have very many failures to it. So it almost implies that maybe the test isn't tough enough, or something to that effect. I'm sure we could come up with some other options to that. But what I wanted to highlight for the commission is that the actual engineers certification and training program is one of our strongest programs in the fire department. And it's there for a reason, because the driver who's operating the fire apparatus and the aerial and everything to do with the pumps and the equipment on the apparatus, they take on a large, significant responsibility. They're driving code 3 in our streets to calls for service with 3 other individuals on the apparatus. They control the livelihood of those individuals and those of the public when they operate our apparatus. And so we invest a lot in this position. And so even just to be eligible to take this promotional exam, it takes between 6 and 12 months of work, where they complete 7 different task booklets that take at least 116 hours. And then they have to actually perform and pass 15 different written and manipulative tests. And that just gets them an opportunity to take the promotional exam itself. So by the time they get to the promotional exam, their skill set is so refined that failure really isn't a common occurrence with these exams. And I guess that's the piece that I wanted to really highlight for the commission, is that even though these individuals are, let me back up with that. We've promoted 7 out of the 14 on the list, but it might beg the question of, well, gosh, you're getting kind of deep on the list. Are they really promotable? And I guess that's my point of describing what that certification process is that, really in this situation, these individuals are high performers. They were within just a couple of points of, the candidates above them, and they're absolutely promotable. And I'm more than willing to take on any questions that you might have through either the memo or what I just provided.
Simone?
Bill, you are muted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and just make some brief comments. First off, there's 2 different issues. One is, how do you fix the curb with the two individuals that want the list? And then secondly, how do you fix this long term? We're only able to really focus on the two individuals. It's a separate issue of how we fix this long term because I don't think the rule was necessarily written knowing or contemplating ties and the number of interviews that people would be. You know, you have 8 people that have to be interviewed for one slot, how that impacts the rule, this rule of deleting people after 3 interviews. It's an important rule, so we should keep it. I think the other thing is we do need to tweak it to account for that. I think IFF, the president, Joe Roberts, submitted a letter making a recommendation. It's something we could discuss with them and the rest of the bar units, since this is a rule that affects all the bar units. So I think there's a procedure to deal with that. With regard to these 2 individuals, I think there is an opportunity for you folks to be able to correct the problem because the rule doesn't contemplate being interviewed this way with ties and having, it contemplates 3 people at a time being interviewed, the rule of 3, which is how we usually do it. And then that works efficiently with after 3 interviews, you're out. That way people have the opportunity to continue to be interviewed. So my recommendation is that we grant the appeal. I think the fire department supports it. The individual members that are part of it supports it. The IFF as an entity supports it, and then individual members within IFF have said they've supported it. And the HR director did act following the rule, but isn't opposed to solving it for these 2 individuals. So my recommendation is at this point that we deem that they've been interviewed at least one time, because I think the chief interviewed these people one time. And that would, and if we didn't have the ties, they'd have 2 more opportunities to interview with this chief. And so I would ask that they get put back on the eligibility list, and they start off with having been interviewed one time, so they get 2 more times to be interviewed before they get passed over. And that's just for these 2 individuals. We may have to come back forward as to the process.
Thanks, Mr. Silva. Let's, commissioners, this will be a time for clarifying questions. We'll leave the deliberation and motions till after we have public comment. But I see Commissioner Fish has his hand up and Commissioner Carbuccio.
Yeah, I'll let ladies go first. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So we'll talk about that later, but at the moment, Simone, can you help me? So from a Brown acting perspective and from a rule around what we can do on an appeal, I know we can't address the rule itself. We can only address whether or not we remove people from the list now or not. Do we have the flexibility as part of that to put a time certain on how long we would allow them to stay on the list so it doesn't happen the very next time that they fall off? Do you feel that that's within our purview, if that was where we were going and where we decided to deliberate? And if so, why or why not?
I believe that the answer to this is really, okay, good, is really more of an equity fix on this issue. I think it's the fair thing to do is to put them back. And the reason I recommend saying that they've been interviewed once so they get 2 more bites of the apple is because if you said, well, we're putting them back on the list and they've been interviewed twice, then 1 out of the 2 is automatically going to be out. So that really, my answer really just make sure they both have an equal shot of being promoted in the next interviews, if that's what the chief wants to do. And in terms of the Brown Act issue, right now it's just the appeal of the removal. So that's really limited to that rather than solving making any changes to the civil service rules. So I think that's beyond the scope. And then the other part is among the things that you're able to do is put people back onto the list. It doesn't provide any limitation as to how you put them back on the list and the 2 times. So I think that's within your discretion, and I think that fits with the goal of what the rule is meant to do.
So we have the flexibility in your mind to say, put them back on the list and never take them off, or put them back on the list in some time delimited manner in that decision, kind of from council
Yeah,
perspective on this?
long as it's consistent with the intent of the statute, which is to give people a fair
and
opportunity to
equitable
get
chance.
interviewed an appropriate number of times.
Simone.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fish?
Yep, thank you. So a couple questions that I'll let any one of either Chief, Simone, or Courtney answer. But so I understand this right. If you're on the list and you're up for promotion 3 times and declined all 3 times, you come off the list. That's the intent of the rule. That's correct?
It's for promotion or for hire, so it's the same rule,
Okay.
whether it would be an outside list or promotional, but yes.
And the fact is that these 2 gentlemen got scooped up in a much broader list because there were ties. Normally it would be 3 people interviewed for it. Is that correct?
Yes, and the way the ties came down in this case was that one could have been hired, but there was never the opportunity for both to get hired the way the ties ran through this recruitment.
And it sounds like, though, even with the scooping up and the circumstances, they did interview each 3 times. But Courtney, what you're saying is there's no doubt that they couldn't have been hired because of how many people were on the list. Do I understand that right?
Yes, the way they were certified, I mean, they all had the opportunity to get hired, but the way the ties happened, I'm really sorry for the off-key singing happening outside our house right now. There was never someone from this list would have fallen off no matter what without being eligible to be hired because of the way the ties happened. There was no way for the department to hire every single person on this list before they fell off.
And do I understand it right that if the commission reinstates these 2 gentlemen to the list, they just go back on the list? They're not promoted? That's correct? Okay.
That is correct.
And can I think you said this, Simone, you might have said this, but can someone help me understand why if we reinstate them, is the request to reinstate them with 2 more rounds as opposed to 1 more round?
Yeah, and the reason I said 2 more rounds is if we only put them on the list and we assume they've been turned down 2 times, they're on 1 more time, one of the 2 is not going to get it. And so in order to make sure that both have the opportunity to be considered, to get promoted, it's better to have them be deemed to have been interviewed 1 time and that there's 2 times left.
Harry, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's actually I think there might be actually 2 vacancies right now. Is that not accurate?
Well,
We would certify 2 off this because of upcoming vacancies, but that's here nor there.
yeah, we have the potential to have 2 openings for sure. So it's just a timing game but we have 1 to fill as we speak for sure.
So asking it the other way, Simone, why are they coming in with, if they were reinstated, why would they come in with 1 and not 0?
It's my understanding that the chief interviewed this group that had them 1 time, and that gives the chief the opportunity, at a minimum, he gets to consider them 2 more times. So he in fact.
And those were legitimate. Those were legitimate 3-person interviews where these 2 gentlemen did not get the job.
Well, they were all legitimate interviews, Commissioner Finch.
I'm sorry.
They were, but it's my understanding that it was more than 3 people in their group.
I guess maybe one other thing to consider with this, adding 2 interviews to this option, is that we have 1 vacancy for sure. So basically, if the commission were to see this appeal through and put the names back on the list, in theory, what would happen with the 1 position, we would ask for the list, it would get certified. Those 2 names plus 1 more would get certified and sent to us. We would make 1 promotion, and then if that 1 person that is in question here, the 2 names, the rule would kick them back off the list again. So I think, and I'm not, yeah, it's just me hearing, you know, the discussion that it's making me realize if Simone's right, if we don't offer it for 2 interviews, then potentially one person could get made, but the other person would get thrown right back off the list. And if we had another promotion to fill, you would see me back here again with the same memo and a different date. So I think that might be one thing to consider for this.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure I understood it correctly. Thank you, Chief. No, I don't have any more questions.
Commissioner Salas or Commissioner Sepulveda, do you have any clarifying questions for the chief or Simone or Courtney?
So I do, out of curiosity, were there any other candidates that were removed from the list? Or just these 2 individuals?
Just these 2 individuals.
Okay. And then do you anticipate any separations coming up, any pending retirements that might lead to more vacancies opening?
We do have a pending retirement. We don't have the date intact, and this is a list that is expiring on June 9th. So it has somewhat to do with timing on when separations come and when there's a current recruitment taking place.
Okay, thanks.
And just for clarification on my part, the rule is something that we will consider at a different time so that we can maybe circumvent some of what happened in this instance. That's not something that's up for discussion today. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's really about these 2 persons and the recommendations, for example, that Simone presented.
Right. And I'm sorry if I'm a little thick here. I'm just trying to understand fundamentally the problem here. So did these 2 individuals, did they actually interview for 3 different positions during the course of the eligibility list and did not get the job?
Correct.
Okay. So whether there are, I guess I'm hung up about this tie situation, which I don't understand on an eligibility list, why we have ties to begin with. I think fundamentally, there should never be a tie. You know, whether it's veterans preference or a bonus question, extra credits, you know, you pull 2 hoses instead of 1. There seems to me to be a fundamental need to avoid this problem in the first instance, that we don't have ties. But setting that aside, if these 2 individuals were up for an open position, it wasn't an academic interview, it wasn't for something that didn't exist yet, and another candidate was selected, implicit in that, isn't that saying that they were not the best candidate for the job? Not to say they couldn't be a good candidate for the job, but at that time in the department's needs, there was somebody better. Is that a correct statement to make, to surmise from the fact that they were 0 for 3?
It is. I think it is a fair statement, but I guess when you start to kind of dissect the reality of the individuals of the fire department that come in for these interviews, they come in with all passing the exam, which is a feat all to itself. But then they all have varying attributes that come with them, right? And it could be just time on the job to special projects to you know, their abilities in leadership roles in different parts of the organization and how they contribute. And so it is a really tough piece to choose, you know, 1 person out of 3 when they're all very highly qualified, all very competent, all very capable individuals. And at the end of the day, you have to dissect them as individuals and select one. It doesn't mean that they're not fully capable of performing those duties. In fact, a lot of them participate and support the organization by acting, and they have enormous amount of hours acting out of class in this position. So yeah, it's just I think your question is valid. But it's almost in those interviews, you're splitting hairs at points. Somebody just barely edged out the other 2.
Go ahead.
If I could really quick, I think part of it is the comment about the ties, I agree with wholeheartedly. And I think, this has really had the department and Erin and her staff kicking around how we would do this going forward. There are 4 or 5 parts, 3 to 5 parts to this test that are all ranked individually. The averages are put together, and then the rules say we round to the whole point, right? So we have ties, and in a lot of cases, ties can be helpful to departments when they're doing a lot of hiring because they're seeing more needs, say for like police recruit or different things where we're on an outside recruitment. And in this case, because Harry and I literally have gone down this path, I think, a number of times, and I've done it with the labor group. And in this case, there was never the opportunity to hire all of the people if the department wanted to because of what happened with the ties. So it's not that, in one case, someone lower on the list was selected, but there was never the opportunity for all of these individuals to get hired if the department wanted to because of the number of ties that happened. And so I think, based on the conversation we're having, coming back at a future meeting and discussing the opportunity to do this, because I do think the rule is important in some cases, especially when we're doing large outside recruitments and things like that. When we look at it, it is a good rule, but how do we not have tie scores have this impact to anyone participating in a process?
Yeah, I think that's why that conversation is going to be so critical. I completely agree, Courtney.
And I in no way meant to imply that the 2 individuals at issue were not sterling candidates, because I do know from my job how difficult the fire exams are. And I know from sitting on interview panels, a lot of the times you get 3, 5, 7 fantastic candidates, and it's so difficult to just pick one. But allowing this and or addressing the rule down the road, do we really fix a problem? Because let's say we grant the appeal and these 2 individuals go back on the list. Whether they've already had 1 or 2, the very same thing may happen as we continue to extend these eligibility lists. At some point, if one of these individuals or both are very unlucky, couldn't we find ourselves in the same position a month from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now?
And
I think that, yeah.
It doesn't feel like we're really talking about clarifying questions anymore. Is there any way we could do public comment and actually start talking about the meat of this? Because it feels like we all want to go there, but I'm not just clarifying anymore.
Well, I'm just trying to see, some of the thoughts were already expressed. I'm trying to, fish them out. I mean, we can proceed to public comment now and revisit this if you feel more comfortable with that. So let's turn to public comment.
I was trying to be good and targeting my questions like you asked me to, but I had lots to say, and if we can get through public comment, I want to do that.
Sure. Okay. So let's go to public comment. I will now call for a 2-minute pause to allow the public to submit any final comments on the item before commission deliberation. Commissioners, as a reminder, please refresh the view on your screen to ensure new comments appear. Janelle, can we start a 2-minute clock?
Already done.
Thank you. Okay, the commenting period for this item is now closed. Janelle, have we received public comment on this matter?
Yes, we have received 14 comments and support in favor.
And any opposed?
None opposed.
And Mr. Chair, can I make one comment before you folks go on?
Sure.
Yeah, I want to say it before, but I think the impact of the top is pretty important. So I'll give you an example. If the rule was supposed to contemplate that the rule of three is 3 people interview for one position, that if it's only one, if there are no ties and you're only viewing 3 people for one position, that gives you a 33% chance to get that position. However, because of the ties, and say for example you interview 7 people, your ability to get that one position goes down to 14%. So it's literally half of what somebody else would get if there weren't any ties. While the math here that I'm doing isn't dispositive, I think it just puts it into context, the impact of ties in this situation.
Have all the commissioners had time to review the public comments submitted? Does anybody need any more time to review them? Seeing no hands. Discussion? Commissioners? Commissioner Carbucci, I know you had a lot to say.
I was trying not to be first,
You
but I'm
were
happy.
you were
voluntold.
voluntold.
That's how it goes, Bill. So I think that for me, what it appears that this rule is intended to do is provide folks that are unpromotable the ability to fall off the list gracefully, for lack of a better term, in a manner that when they've got multiple opportunities to apply for a position and they're not going to get it, and it doesn't appear when we have, frankly, invested so much time and money into, in particular, employees in our fire and our police divisions, that is the situation that's occurring right now. And I know we're not going to get specifics of the rule right now, and changing that, though, in my comments at the end, I'll ask that we do. I think that the ties really do make a big difference, and all civil service lists that have ties involved in them, whether we support them or we don't, which is something we could choose to fix if we wanted to, or at least recommend fixing. But at the moment, we are kind of stuck where we are. And so I feel like it's only fair that we grant this appeal. And I believe Simone's recommendation is probably the best, to at least give them 2 more bites. I like where Commissioner Fish was going, is does it really count? Should we just let them have 3, or have it tied to the fact that, 3 interviews that have less than 5 people in them, or something like that? But I feel like that this is fair and equitable to our employees. And frankly, we want to keep our employees that are good employees. And then I think we do need to come back and talk about fixing the rule. And I'm down for that conversation. Bill, if you want to have it about ties and what we think of ties.
Okay. Other commissioners, comments, discussion? Commissioner Fish raising his hand.
Listen, for those who don't know, I work in HR, and for those who also know, I referee basketball, and there's rules, and rules are followed so we don't have chaos. What I also know is that in regards to my basketball life, we live off the edict that intent of the rule is important. If a follow my analogy, but if a post player has a big toe on the key, that's technically 3 in the key. However, his entire body is out of the key except for his big toe. Am I going to call 3 in the key? That's not the intent of the rule, and I don't think the rule as written is the intent of the rule. And it would seem more to punish not to punish, but indirectly to have a negative impact on these firefighters. So my opinion would be to go with the intent of the rule. I'm fine with the proposal of 2 left, and then, you know, our esteemed councils on this committee can go to town and rewrite some rules if they'd like to. Thank you.
As a new kid on the block here and listening to all of the presentations and having the opportunity to listen to the recommendation of Simone, I also think that to Commissioner Corey Fish's point, we want to look at the intent of the rule, and I think that by providing the opportunity that Simone has outlined, that we do that, and then really then take a look at the rule and at a later date and be able to have a hearty discussion on that and see if it is a fit, because I think otherwise we'll be here again with a very similar situation. And so I think that's where the work is going to have to be done. I have no problem with the recommendation, but I also think that we need to take a strong look at the rule.
Commissioner Salas?
So I concur with my fellow commissioners. One thing that I thought of when I was reading this was whether there was an impact on the police department or perhaps a large department like Public Works, if this is something that comes up as well. So I think that it's really good for us to consider a revision to the rule in a future meeting.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. I concur with everything everybody has said. I think they were very sage and wise comments. I guess intellectually, I'm a little bit torn because I'm trained to be a rule follower. And when I read rules that are very clear to me, that's what's troubling to me. And in 1.04, I4, it's a mandatory duty on behalf of the HR director. It says will. The first portion, removal of name, for other reasons under 1.03F is a may. It's a discretionary. This one, whether it's for unsatisfactory service or not being appointed after 3 interviews, being on the eligibility list, says the HR director will remove, which to me is a mandatory duty. So certainly as a prefatory comment, I can't blame Courtney or HR. They did what they were supposed to do. And when I look at the power of the commission in 1.04J, it says if the Civil Service Commission determines the decision of the Director of Human Resources was not proper, and then it goes on. So I think, you know, my initial glance is crap, I'm kind of stuck there. It seems very clear English to me. There's no reason for any sort of interpretation. We have no evidence of intent to the contrary. But then when I hear there's no opposition from HR, there's no opposition from Simone, there's support from IAFF, support from the 14 public commenters, and in recognition to, we want this city to have the best possible employees. And if the appointing authority, the fire chief himself, is behind this, then it makes me doubt, or, you know, like Simone initially stated, find an equitable way to deviate from the rule. It's kind of the cart before the horse. This rule, I think we all agree, is not great and needs to be rewritten. I'm not even sure we need it, because the first portion of that rule in J, going back to 103F, I think covers all the reasons to disqualify somebody. So if it's merely due to ties or merely due to the fact that we as the commission keep extending these lists, and I understand why we do it with fire, there's incredible intensive training. So to not extend them would be kind of a, you know, an inefficient use of resources. But I'm really leaning and stretching and straining to find a way to get over what I think is very plain English. Is it fair? No. But when I'm hearing from everybody, I'm going to adopt Simone's suggestion and just go under the guise of equity that we want to do what's fair to the employees and what's best for the city. I mean, that's what these rules are intended to be guided by, and whether this one carries that to fruition or not is subject to debate, which I think we've already started that debate. So with that said, I did want to state for the record that I think initially upon review of the rules, it's kind of clear that our hands are bound, but I am going to step out of that rule following role, especially based on everybody from A to Z at the city, that this is best for the city. So I intend to support what my other commissioners have said. Any other comment? But I do want to echo, I don't remember if it was Commissioner Salas or Commissioner Sepulveda. I do think we do need to have a robust discussion whether we need this portion of the rule to begin with, and if we do, how do we tweak it? Because we are going to be right back here, and I'm actually surprised we haven't had this issue pop up before. And I'd like to talk down the road, with Courtney. Is there something we can change regarding ties? We'll get to that another day. With that said, I've talked enough. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Before we take a vote, is everybody ready to vote, or does anybody want any more discussion or deliberation? Seeing no hands, no mouths moving. I have to cross all the cascades of people just to make sure I'm not missing a hand. Okay. I know I've read the public comment, and a lot of members of the fire department are very supportive of this, so that really resonates with me as well. Does anybody want to make a motion? And the motion would be as set forth, as we've already discussed. It would not be the second request of the fire chief to fix the rule. It would be to grant the appeal under Civil Service Rule 1.04 I4. So with that said, does somebody want to entertain a motion?
Can we make it a little broader? Can we make the motion to grant the appeal, keeping the 2 individuals on the list for 2 additional testings as Simone had suggested?
Sure. Is that the motion you're making?
I'm so supporting Simone's motion, yes.
Okay. Well, there's a motion by Commissioner Carbuccia. Do I have a second?
I second.
No, second.
Okay. Can we take a roll vote, please?
Yes, Commissioner Carbuccia,
Aye.
Commissioner Sepulveda,
Aye.
Commissioner Salas,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fish,
Aye.
Chair Gersten.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you, everybody, for presenting and commenting and taking the time to educate us. Okay, we'll move on to other business. Next item on the agenda are staff comments. Courtney, Tanya, Janelle.
I think we have one more item, the establishment of a new.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss that?
You did.
Yes, I did. Moving back to action items. The next item on the agenda is item 3, consideration to approve the addition of the following classification to the classification plan per Civil Service Rule 1.02A sub 3. Does staff have any a presentation?
This is a new classification being established for our IT department. It's in the MMPR bargaining unit. There's been a need to have kind of a new standalone IT position. One of our IT managers is currently doing his job as IT manager and overseeing this work. And the network side of it as the city grows and builds out and as a smart city is needed. So we've identified this classification.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners for Courtney? Clarifying questions? Commissioner Fish?
Courtney, is this just creating the position, or is it creating the opening? If it's creating the opening, is it budgeted?
It's creating the position that is going to be in the city manager's budget, proposed budget. So we're creating the we're creating the title here, and then it'll be in the proposed budget that goes to council.
Thank you.
And Courtney, once created, how long is the eligibility list good for? I'm joking.
Standard, no.
I'm joking.
Position.
Any other clarifying questions from the commissioners for Courtney? Seeing none, let's go to public comment. I will now call for a 2-minute pause to allow the public to submit any final comments on the item before the commission deliberates. Commissioners, as a reminder, please refresh the view on your screen to ensure new comments appear. Can we set a timer for 2 minutes, please?
Tanya is working on it.
Okay.
I'll start my timer.
Thank you. Okay, the commenting period for this item is now closed. Have the commissioner, Janelle, did we receive any public comment?
No public comments were received.
Okay. Any other further comments or questions? Entertain a motion? Anybody?
Oh, I was muted. Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Fish. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Janelle, can we take a vote by roll call, please?
Commissioner Carbuccia,
Aye.
Commissioner Sepulveda,
Aye.
Commissioner Salas, okay, got her. Okay, Commissioner Vice Chair Fish,
Sorry, I kept trying to
Aye.
unmute. Yes, aye.
a finger works too. Vice Chair Fish
Aye as well.
and Chair Gersten.
Aye. And that motion passes unanimously 5-0. Now moving on to other business. Next item on the agenda are staff comments. Janelle, Courtney, Tanya. Any comments? Simone?
I have no additional comments. Just thank you for my time and your patience during this spring break week in our household. So I apologize for any of the noises behind me, but thank you all very much for your time today.
Anybody else, staff-wise?
Yes, thank you. Take care.
Okay. Any, do we have any, I have no comments other than the usual questions. Anything on the radar coming down the pike that we should know about or plan for? Nothing? Seeing Courtney shake her head and assuming a kid's not pulling on the back of her hair, I'll take that as a no. Commissioners, any comments? Not everybody. Oh, Commissioner Carpuccia waving her hand.
So is that it's officially noticed, can we request that staff bring forward the rule that we just talked about? And some recommendations on how they would suggest changing it? And can we also, if we're allowed, ask for some reach out to our associations, kind of as I believe Commissioner Salas had discussed about how it could impact different units and different departments, on what an impact of a change might be. The change that was recommended by our fire chief may not be the same as might be recommended by any of our public works departments.
Any other suggestions or comments from commissioners? Okay, with that said, seeing no hands, we will adjourn. It is 6:17 p.m. and we are adjourning this meeting to the next scheduled meeting of May 6, 2021 via teleconference. And hopefully someday they won't be by teleconference. Anyhow, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.